अस्सलाम वालेकुम। प्रोग्राम एम्बेसी रोड में खुश आमदीद। नाज़रीन, आज हमारे मेहमान हैं यूरोपीय यूनियन के सफ़ीर लॉर्स वेगमार्क। लॉर्स वेगमार्क काफ़ी अरसे से पाकिस्तान में यूरोपीय यूनियन की नुमाइंदगी कर रहे हैं। यूरोपीय यूनियन और पाकिस्तान के दरमियान ताउन जो है और पार्टनरशिप बहुत पुरानी है और यूरोपीय यूनियन बजाते ही एक पावर सेंटर के तौर पर उभर रहा है आलमी मामलात के अंदर। इस वक्त यूरोपीय यूनियन पाकिस्तान का एक बड़ा तजारती पार्टनर है। यूरोपीय यूनियन पाकिस्तान में तालीम और सेहत के शोबों में भी बहुत ज़्यादा सरमायाकारी कर रहा है, पाकिस्तान की मदद कर रहा है। 100 मिलियन यूरो जो है यूरोपीय यूनियन ने दिए हैं तालीम के लिए, KPK और सिंध के सूबों के लिए, और इसके अलावा यूरोपीय यूनियन बहुत से और मामलात में पाकिस्तान की मदद कर रहा है। इस वक्त जो इलेक्शन कमीशन है उसकी कारकर्दगी को बेहतर बनाने के लिए, वोटिंग सिस्टम को इम्प्रूव करने के लिए और वोटरों को सियासी शऊर देने के लिए और उनको वोटिंग का राइट देने के लिए भी बहुत से ऐसे इक़दाम हैं जो यूरोपीय यूनियन कर रही है और पाकिस्तान को फंड्स फराहम कर रही है। इन्हीं मौज़ूआत पर हम बात करेंगे यूरोपीय यूनियन के सफ़ीर से। एम्बेसडर, वेलकम टू दिस शो। थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर ज्वाइनिंग अस। European Union and Pakistan, they are both partners in trade, commerce, and in many areas. So, how do you look at this partnership? Is it going strong, or you think that it is declining?
No, in fact, I think we're on a real high point, really, and we have increased the intensity of our relations just in the past year or two. We had the first visit of the EU High Representative, that's like the Foreign Minister for the European Union, Mrs. Cathy Ashton, Baroness Ashton, who was here in early June. She had good meetings with your government, but also met with civil society representatives and went to Lahore. We have agreed earlier this year on an engagement plan for the coming 5 years. And I think we have expanded, really. I remember when we spoke last year, Javid, how I tried to make the point that our relationship has also become more political. It's not just a question of trade and aid anymore. And I think over the past 6 to 12 months, that has been shown. We are now talking about issues with Pakistan concerning also security, including terrorism, including counter-narcotics, and of course the situation in the region, be it your relations with Afghanistan, India, Iran, or other countries in this region. And I personally very much welcome this, because I
think
the
security issue, what kind of cooperation is there between EU and Pakistan? Is EU extending some financial help to increase or enhance the capability of Pakistan to fight terror, or you are imparting training to our forces, police, and other anti-terror groups, or what is the nature of that assistance?
Well, it's first of all non-military assistance, because the EU normally does not provide any military assistance, although the European Union these days also has a military dimension, if I may call it that.
Because of NATO's troops' presence in Afghanistan?
No, it has nothing to do with NATO, actually. The EU has its own common security policy. Of course, those of our member states who are also members of NATO draw on the same troops' capabilities, especially these days when armies' military resources are limited. But the European Union runs its own counter-piracy operation off the coast of Somalia, of the Horn of Africa, where Pakistan is also participating. Interestingly, Pakistan is participating in the NATO force there, whereas the EU has its own force. And I think this is an area where we could develop cooperation with Pakistan as regards terrorism, as regards law and order in Pakistan itself. We have just completed a major program which included both training of police and judiciary prosecutors, young prosecutors, which is...
they received this training here in Pakistan?
They received this training here. So did police. In fact, we also had media training in terms of police and journalists meeting and trying to understand a little bit better their different positions. And we also, in fact, handed over special equipment, 8 units, to deal with explosives, bombs, so-called IEDs and the like, which is a big problem, especially in some areas. So 4 of these mobile units we gave to the police in KPK and 4 to the authorities in Punjab.
European Union is also a trade partner of Pakistan, and Pakistan is exporting a lot of stuff, particularly textile products, to European Union. Recently, the concessions which were announced by European Union after the floods, is the things are going on the right track, or something more is to be done for Pakistan to benefit from these concessions?
No, I think we're back on track again. There was first an issue in the WTO, as you know, last year, which was finally resolved the beginning of this year.
Because of the objections of India and Bangladesh.
Yes. Well, I would like to underline that it was not just India and Bangladesh. In fact, at the end of the day, it was a number of other countries outside of the subcontinent. And I think both India and Bangladesh, after some questions, hesitations, took a very constructive attitude. And I think that's symptomatic of the more positive atmosphere in the whole region.
Subcontinent.
Yes, in the subcontinent. And that's something that we very much welcome from the side of the European Union. And I must say, during the year and a half I have been here now, I think this is the most positive development in terms of Pakistan's relations with its...
So what Pakistan has to do to get maximum benefit from these concessions? You need Pakistan to take some steps.
Well, I think first of all now, when the trade concessions, the post-flood trade concessions finally will enter into force, which we expect to be 1st of October this year. It still needs to be approved finally in September by the European Parliament, but that now seems to be virtually
no hurdle
guaranteed.
Is there now.
Virtually guaranteed, yes. There have been extensive negotiations with Parliament, with Member States, because as you know, in the European Union, several of our member states are facing quite a serious economic crisis, and some of their industry was concerned with increased competition from Pakistan. So there's always another side of the coin. But I think there is very strong, overwhelming support, I think, for these measures now to go ahead. And then, of course, it will be a matter for the Pakistani industry, primarily the textile industry, but also in certain other areas, ethanol and so on, to be able to take advantage, to increase their capacity to go up to this higher level that they now can export to the European Union.
Is there any other condition attached to it? I mean, in terms of improving the quality of the products, or what else?
No, there's no. I mean, this will be based on the usual market conditions. That is, if you have customers for your products made in Pakistan in the European Union, it will now be easier for the 75 items, the 75 products that are listed under these trade concessions. Then, of course, the next step will be next year, when Pakistan will be in a position to apply for so-called GSP+.
GSP+. Yeah. But that's, I think, the benchmark has been raised a little further. Pakistan is being asked to meet certain conditions on human rights front and do away with the capital punishment and things like that. So on the GSP+, do you think that Pakistan will be able to qualify to become, to benefit or to take advantage of GSP+?
Yes, I do think Pakistan could qualify, but it's important to underline that it's now up to Pakistan to show that it is trying, I underline trying, to meet these standards on human rights, but also in terms of democracy, in terms of labor standards, even some environmental standards. I don't think the conditions have really changed from the previous regulation, with this new regulation that has in fact been passed by the European Parliament, and that was a real piece of good news just a month ago. But now Pakistan will need to show that it is meeting. There are 27 human rights conventions covered by this trading regime. So it's not just a trading regime, it's also a human rights regime. I'm confident that
But Pakistan has also signed these conventions.
Pakistan has signed and ratified all of these conventions. And Pakistan removed some reservations it had last year against two of these conventions, the Convention Against Torture and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And that was also a very welcome initiative by your government. And I think there is strong support for that. I think your Human Rights Ministry is doing a very good job in terms of now making sure that everyone is aware of these standards, and it will also be up to the provinces.
We'll take a short break, Excellency, and then we'll come back. नाज़रीन, एक मुख्तसर ब्रेक लेते हैं और ब्रेक से वापसी के बाद हम पाकिस्तान में EU के सफ़ीर से मज़ीद गुफ्तगू करेंगे टेररिज्म के हवाले से कि हमारा जो ताउन है यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ, और इसके अलावा तजारत के शोबे में क्या मज़ीद पेशरफ्त हो सकती है, इस पर बात करें. Welcome back. Ambassador, the High Representative of Security and Foreign Policy of European Union was here some time back. What was the subject of discussion here? Or was she here to boost the cooperation between European Union and Pakistan on war on terror, on security matters, and on regional issues?
I think her meetings covered all of those issues, and the European Union is very keen to develop our cooperation in all areas, from security, the war on terror, but also, of course, as we just discussed, in economic and trading terms. There is a vast potential there that we still...
On cooperation on terror, terrorism is a global phenomenon, but Pakistan, Afghanistan, and this region is hit the most. And do you think that EU can help Pakistan fight this terrorism or the menace of terrorism more effectively?
What we are trying to do is to work closely with your authorities here, both on a national level but also on a provincial and local level. And we see terrorism not just as a question of fighting with military means, but I think it's a fight over the hearts and minds of the people, of the so-called militants. I think when people take up arms, that means that they're deeply frustrated with something. They have a deep-seated antagonism. Could be a lack of education, could be a lack of channels where they can channel their opposition, which is why the forthcoming elections will be so important. So especially in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, especially in the Malakand division, we will be trying to work directly at a local level with union councils, some 100 union councils that we have identified together with your authorities, together with authorities in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. We've also discussed this with the military.
What kind of activities to take place at the Union Council level?
This is really for them to define, because it's very important that we don't come and impose our agenda on people, on the local communities. If they need better schools, if they need more energy, if they need better roads, we are prepared to work in all of those areas. And it's essential that the local community has a say over what is being done, that they take ownership and that they also contribute. If we build a school, that they may contribute with the land. If we build a road, that we build a road that leads somewhere that the local people can use, and not a road that leads nowhere.
Are you facing any difficulty in implementing this project there? There is a resistance there because, you know, in North Waziristan, for instance, the locals have refused the eradication of polio, and they have refused their children to be treated. So, you know, is there any difficulty that you are facing there?
No, so far I was myself together with a number of other EU ambassadors from the member states here in Islamabad. We all went to Swat in April and spent a couple of days there. And I think when you talk with people there, including locals, they say, no, please come more often. And more Pakistanis also, by the way. I recently saw a survey that almost half of all Pakistanis are still afraid to go to Swat as tourists. I was there myself, and I think it is a wonderful place, as you know. I think it is now relatively safe. That is not to say that everything is perfect, but this is also why we stand ready to work there, but also in other, shall we say, more unstable regions. So far we have done very little in Fatah, except for humanitarian assistance to internally displaced people due to the conflict in the tribal areas. But we are ready to work also in places like Banjul, in Waziristan, in Khyber Agency, etc. If there is, of course, a willingness, as you say, if the local people does not want our assistance, we cannot force them to
in the neighboring Afghanistan, there's a huge turmoil, and the international forces are present there, the NATO troops, the American troops, and they have also announced that they'll be leaving Afghanistan by year 2014. So you think that they can make it, or they will be facing difficulty in disengaging themselves from Afghanistan?
I think there's been a very clear decision taken at the highest level. There was a summit in Chicago where also your president participated in May, and I think the decision has now been taken to disengage from Afghanistan. But when you talk about disengagement, if I look at it from the perspective of the European Union, we are in fact increasing our engagement in Pakistan. We're about to sign a cooperation agreement with Afghanistan along the same lines as what we already have with Pakistan for many years, which will broaden the basis for our relations with Afghanistan. In terms of development assistance, Afghanistan is by far the largest recipient of development aid and humanitarian aid from the European Union.
Yes, but
over 1 billion euros per year is going to Afghanistan these days. Of course, we all know the difficulties, the problems there, and we very much welcome a constructive approach also from the side of Pakistan, and I think your government has taken some important initiatives.
Sometime back, the reconciliation process had been started, and it was being hoped that the United States of America, NATO, and the Taliban will talk to each other, will negotiate a settlement. Some efforts were made. An office was opened at Doha in Qatar. And initially these efforts looked quite good, but now they have been pushed into the background. So do you think that both parties are not serious, or what's happening?
Well, I'm not really responsible for Afghanistan, of course. There's a European Union head of delegation there and many others, so whatever I say is just my personal comments. I think as far as this Doha track or process or any reconciliation, any talks, you said the two parties. We have to ask ourselves, who are the two parties then? And I know that's a question that's frequently asked here in Pakistan. When we talk about reconciliation, what do we mean? What are the terms There are certain conditions that have been laid down both by the government of Afghanistan, United States and others have endorsed this. But personally, I think for this to work, and I'm still hopeful that it will one day. I worked, as you know, in Afghanistan 10 years ago when the situation was rather different, that it is as an inclusive process as possible. I actually think Pakistan can show by setting an example of how you have evolved as a democracy also for your Afghan friends, especially in some of the areas bordering on Afghanistan.
But these talks with Taliban, the US and Taliban, Karzai government and Taliban, quite often, they seem to be moving forward. Then suddenly they receive a setback and the process is reversed. Is there a lack of trust, or what is the reason?
Well, I'm sure there is a lack of trust on all sides. And of course, if the Taliban engage in some suicide bombing attacks or attack government installations, civilian targets, at the same time as the coalition, the Afghan forces are doing likewise, it's very difficult to fight and talk at the same time, as you know. Yet there is a dialogue ongoing. It has started, then stopped, then started again, which I think is a sign that there is an interest on both sides. So I think the Afghans themselves are tired of war after many years.
Ultimately, the Afghan crisis can be solved through dialogue and not through the battle of gun.
Yes, and I think without too much outside interference also. I mean, we must, as we've all said, we must let the Afghans decide over their own country, over their own destiny. There's been, as we know, too much interference, too much meddling over decades, centuries in Afghanistan. I think they need to develop their own brand of democracy. As you know, in the 1970s, Afghanistan was a place where people traveled from Pakistan.
Yeah, it was peaceful, quite peaceful.
It was very peaceful.
We'll continue this discussion. नाज़रीन, एक मुख्तसर ब्रेक लेते हैं. ब्रेक से वापसी के बाद हम पाकिस्तान में यूरोपीय यूनियन के सफ़ीर से मज़ीद गुफ्तगू जो है जारी रखेंगे कि जब इंटरनेशनल फोर्सेस निकलेंगी अफगानिस्तान से तो क्या मंजर होगा वहाँ. Welcome back. Ambassador, when the foreign troops leave Afghanistan in year 2014, you think that the Afghan National Army, which has been trained by European Union, by US and other forces, are they capable of handling the security responsibilities in Afghanistan?
Well, I would certainly hope so. It's not really for me to comment on the capacity of the Afghan National Army. I think it's undeniable that it's much more capable now than it was 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, when there hardly was any Afghan army. And we've seen the chaos in the 1990s, the civil war, the brutality. We've seen the rise of the Taliban. So I think it's in everybody's interest to have a strong Afghan army that can take care of its own security. Of course, Afghanistan, as far as I can recall, has never posed a threat to any of its neighbors. Afghanistan has never attacked anyone. It has, however, been invaded.
It has been attacked by others
on many occasions. At the same time, Afghanistan has had difficulties to maintain law and order inside its own territory. And I think the fundamental problem today is that Afghanistan needs to have adequate capacity to deal with its own security. And of course, this is also very much in the interest of Pakistan, because it will otherwise spill over on your side of the border, and we know the effects of that.
Coming back to Pakistan and EU relations, Pakistan has suffered a lot in this war against terror. Pakistan has suffered almost 50,000 loss of life. Soldiers and innocent citizens were killed in explosions, IEDs, and shootings and killings. Pakistan has also lost, according to official estimates, almost $70 billion in economic terms. How can EU help Pakistan to rebuild its economy, or to some extent compensate for that loss?
Well, what we're trying to do is, first of all, listen to what Pakistan and Pakistanis themselves would like us to assist them with, and that is one reason we have tried to liberalize and open up more possibilities for trade. Of course, the European Union already is the largest trading partner of Pakistan. We have these trade concessions. We have the possibility of GSP+. So that's one track. And I think more trade will also offer more jobs. Then in terms of priorities, our priority number one, and this is something we have agreed with you, with Pakistan, is education. And here I would like to underline public education and primary education, in particular in Sindh, but also Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, where we're supporting the authorities directly. They receive money in their budget.
The two provinces.
Yes, these two provinces.
And now that the education has been devolved, the functions of education ministry, planning, etc., have been transferred to provinces, under 18th Amendment. So you will be directly dealing with provinces now.
We are already directly dealing with provinces. For a number of years, we have been talking directly with the education authorities, the ministries, etc., both in Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
What is your experience? Are they responding, cooperating with you?
Yes.
And the results are tangible results?
I think the needs are so vast, so great, that whatever we can do, we're talking about that we are providing right now as we speak about 30 million euros to Sindh and 40 million euros to KP. That amounts to maybe 1 or 2% of the overall needs, the overall budget, and we're providing direct budget support. Now, of course, that is not going to change the situation on the ground in terms of lack of schools in central Sindh or in KP. And here I'd like to say that whatever we do can only be in addition to what Pakistan itself is doing. And I must say that I think if Pakistan wants to progress long term, and if we want to look at where
it has to invest in education.
It has to invest in education, because this is perhaps the most serious challenge today. And we live, as you know, in a global world where Pakistan has, over the last 10 years, partly as a result of the war on terror, and here we try to be as supportive as possible in every way, both politically but also through economic means.
As you said, that this is only 2% of the total investment in education, the money that you are providing, the funds that you are providing. So are you thinking to enhance or increase these funds so that the problem of primary education in public sector is addressed effectively?
I would welcome that. At the same time as I think the federal government or the Pakistan as a whole spends less than 2% on education, whereas you spend, according to official figures, 18% on defense, according to general estimates, probably more, 25 or even 30% of the overall budget goes to the military. And while every country needs to have a military, and certainly in this region, and considering terrorism and so on, let's just assume that half of that, which would be more normal, I think you have one of the highest ratios of military spending in the world. And you have a very impressive and professional military, I might add, that overall is doing its job. But if you were to spend 10% or 15% of your budget, of course it's an opportunity cost, and that's a choice also. I don't think you have to spend as much on military as you're doing today.
But because, as you mentioned, that it's the region is very unstable. Pakistan, India have very tense relations. They have been having very tense relations. They have fought wars. The Kashmir is a problem, Kashmir issue. And the water issue is also a big problem in this region. So the tension is there. So therefore, there is a justification for Pakistan to keep a big army, and that's why we are spending a lot of money on that. But obviously, the educational budget needs to be increased. And if Pakistan doesn't have the resources, friendly countries like EU, other countries, Japan and Canada and US, or other European countries can help Pakistan effectively address the problem of illiteracy in this country.
No, as I said, we have every interest in doing that, in supporting the fight against illiteracy, which I think is as important or more important than the fight against terrorism or the fight against militancy, because ignorance, as you know,
it breeds
ignorance, breeds militancy, violence. Now, coming back, if I may, to the question of your relations with India, of course, they have improved as of late, but we also know from the last 60 years or so, you have fought 3 wars, and I think nobody's under the illusion that all the problems have been resolved or will be resolved. But I think both sides of the border could now capitalize on the improved relations by trying to reduce the tension, which I think is already happening, and as a result of that also reduce the numbers, the spending on military.
Defense.
And of course, India is so much bigger an economy than Pakistan.
It's imposing an arms
Pakistan
race
will always have, even if you spent 100% of your budget on military, you will not be able to keep up with a so much bigger country. And it's clear to me that a number of people have drawn that conclusion here in Pakistan, and this is one reason why I think in a very active and positive way, your government, I think there's near consensus among all the political parties, are now seeking to improve relations with your largest neighbor. And in terms of economic development, it's so obvious that if you can improve your political relations and your trading relations with India, everything else is dwarfed. Anything we can do as European Union is going to be small compared to if you can make a peaceful transition in reconciliation. It will not happen overnight.
We'll take another break, Excellency. नाज़रीन एक और मुख्तसर ब्रेक लेते हैं और ब्रेक से वापसी के बाद हम पाकिस्तान में यूरोपीय यूनियन के सफ़ीर लार्स विगेमार्क से मज़ीद गुफ्तगू करेंगे पाकिस्तान और यूरोपीय यूनियन के ताल्लुकात के हवाले से. Welcome back. You mentioned that you are helping Pakistan, at least in 2 provinces, in the field of education, building schools, providing training to the teachers and all that. Is there a monitoring system in place? The money that you are giving is being rightly expended and is being used the manner that is satisfactory and the results are being achieved?
No, of course, we have quite an elaborate monitoring system to try to follow what is being done with the money, with the support that we are providing. There are various experts that follow up. We do regular audits. And if we were dissatisfied or found that the conditions for providing this kind of educational assistance were not acceptable, we would not be doing it.
Another field is health. Pakistan is also not spending much on health because of the reasons that you mentioned. Pakistan is spending a lot of money on defense and security issues. Is European Union ready to help Pakistan provide more health facilities to the people, especially in backward areas?
No, in fact, we already do. We provide basic health, such as instruction to children and to families on how to have good hygiene, to prevent communicable diseases, to prevent people from drinking water that is not clean, and so on. We have so-called WASH programs that are often part of different types of educational programs that we run, also of humanitarian assistance, especially if you have people living in camps after floods, after earthquakes, after displacements due to conflicts in Fatah, in Balochistan, where we're working very closely together with the United Nations and others in terms of providing this as a package. You know, it's not enough simply to come and provide some food or tents if somebody has had to leave their homes because of floods. You also have to make sure, in particular in that environment, that communicable diseases such as cholera and so on are not spreading quickly.
Are you intending to build some more concrete projects, like, you know, building hospitals where the treatment could be meted out to patients, serious patients, and help build a system through which, you know, the sick people or the people who are suffering from various fatal diseases, they can be treated?
We have provided assistance to so-called bricks and mortars to build hospitals, clinics, and so on in the past, and I believe we're still doing so. But in general terms, most of our assistance is not for buildings. We feel that that is really for the local and regional authorities
but
to
providing
deal with.
equipment,
But providing
medicines.
equipment, providing training, capacity, etc. That being said, I will admit that health in terms of development assistance long term has not been one of our priorities under the current programs we had. As I said, yes, humanitarian assistance, and if there are new floods this summer, which may happen, hopefully not, then we stand ready to provide this kind of health and sanitary assistance as well.
Many NGOs are operating in Pakistan, and European Union is also providing funds to them in social sector, particularly in health and education. What is their performance? Or are you satisfied they are doing well? They have been able to achieve the objectives that were given to them?
In general, yes. We are trying to work as much as possible these days with Pakistani NGOs. There are many good international NGOs, and many of them are active here. Unfortunately, many international NGO workers are having difficulties getting visas. Sometimes they're even harassed, and I'm afraid some of this is linked with what happened after Abbottabad and the Dr. Afridi case and so on. And let me assure you that we are not aware of anybody who's working with EU funding, who's engaging in any kind of illicit or spying activities. And I'd rather not comment on the specifics of the Dr. Afridi case, but of course he was instrumental in identifying the most sought-after criminal in the world. But as I said, we would really like to work more with Pakistani NGOs, and we have identified in particular the so-called rural support programs that you have in Balochistan and in KP, the Balochistan Rural Support Program and in KP, a similar rural support program. And we would like to work with them and other local NGOs that have the capacity and that are also supported by Pakistani authorities and that are run by Pakistanis, because I think a general problem here in Pakistan has been that there have been a kind of division of labor between international organizations coming in, sometimes during a humanitarian crisis, flooding, earthquakes, doing a lot of good work, and then in the longer term, the Pakistani organizations take over. We would like to work more directly with Pakistani organizations.
Pakistani NGOs, but my question was that are you satisfied with their performance? You must have set some goals for them, and they are achieving these goals.
Yes, I think overall they're achieving their goals. I think many capable Pakistanis are working for NGOs. Of course, there has been a tendency in the past that everybody sets up their own NGO, and sometimes perhaps the purpose is not entirely served by what they're doing. But of course, we have been here for a long time.
Is there a monitoring system? Is there a monitoring system in place so that if the funds that are being given to these organizations for using them in health or education sector, and you have a tight watch or a close watch on them?
We have a very close watch when it comes to the financial flows and the follow-up and the reporting. And I think if you were to ask any of these organizations who have received funding, who have worked with the European Union, they will tell you that it's quite elaborate and rather difficult. And in fact, some of them have declined, some smaller organizations, to work with us because they know that the requirements are so extensive. That being said, I think one thing that we need to do more of, and we've been trying to do that over the last year or two, is to really go out in the field and visit the projects that different NGOs and other organizations are working on, are implementing, and see what is being done. I'm a firm believer not just in following the money, as they said after the Watergate scandal, but also to see what are the results. And if we are not achieving the results according to the criteria that we have set, that we have established, usually together with Pakistan authorities at both federal and provincial level, then we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be throwing good money after bad money.
Thank you, Ambassador. नाज़रीन, आज हमने गुफ्तगू की है पाकिस्तान में यूरोपीय यूनियन के सफ़ीर जनाब लार्स वेगेमार्क से, और उनसे हमने बातचीत की है पाकिस्तान और यूरोपियन यूनियन के दरमियान जो अब समझौता हुआ है। पाकिस्तान जो है सैलाबों के बाद पाकिस्तान को यूरोपीय यूनियन ने मराहत का एक पैकेज दिया जिसके तहत पाकिस्तान अपनी बरामदात ज़्यादा बड़ी मिकदार और तादाद में यूरोपीय यूनियन के माल को बरामद करेगा। एम्बेसडर ने ये भी बताया कि पाकिस्तान और यूरोपीय यूनियन के दरमियान सिक्योरिटी की मामलात पर भी एक ताउन का सिलसिला जारी है। उनका ख्याल है कि अफ़गानिस्तान में अब अमन होना चाहिए और एक मुज़ाकराती अमल के ज़रिए वहाँ पे अमन कायम किया जाना चाहिए। उन्होंने कहा कि पाकिस्तान को हम तालीम और सेहत के शोबे में मदद दे रहे हैं, ख़ास तौर पर KPK और सिंध के सूबों में वो बहुत बड़ा पैसा जो है सर्व कर रहे हैं इस समाजी शोबे में हालात को बेहतर बनाने के लिए। इसी के साथ ये प्रोग्राम ख़त्म होता है। जावेद सिद्दीक को इजाज़त दीजिए। खुदा हाफ़िज़। थैंक यू एम्बेसडर। It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Javed.
Thank you.